In the year 2020, I started a podcast about movies. Some episodes occasionally focused on other media as well. As I dealt with threatening interdimensional beings, I eventually met my other self from another universe where all the stuff I talked about got delayed. As it turns out, the stories as me and my guests described them were presented very differently in that other universe. So I continued podcasting these recaps, which apparently sound like improvised reviews, to entertain listeners of that other universe while they waited for the new release dates. Some episodes even focused on content of years past that did not come out in that other universe for whatever reason. The year is 2022. The podcast is now bi-weekly, unless stated otherwise. My name is Steven Shinder, and you're listening to Delayed Replay. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, as always, Steven Shinder, and joining me, he's been on a few episodes, including the previous Dunecember episode from 2 years ago, and that's right, we're doing Dunecember Part 2 right now. It is Vinny Tangherlini. What's up?
Yo! Dune,
Dunecember. Stars in the night. It's got stars in the night and sand on the ground. That's how the song goes.
The famous Dunecember song.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, so we're talking about Dune Part 2, obviously. In our universe, it came out in October because, you know, the new Star Wars movie was coming out, like, in December of this year for us. And,
Right.
you know, they wanted to avoid competition, and there wasn't as much competition in October, so they released it on, like, the 20th or something for us here. But, yeah, we wanted to wait a bit so that we could, like, put this out for, like, December, so it's Dunecember proper, you know?
Yeah, classic Dunecember.
Yeah, and we've got, like, the Dunecember traditions. So first off, we'll share, like, a couple holiday movie or show recs we might have. So I don't know if you remember what you mentioned last time, but see if you can think of any holiday recs that you didn't recommend before.
Don't remember what I said last time, so if I said this last time, I will immediately not apologize, because
Okay.
I can recommend it twice. I always recommend Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
I actually saw that for the first time the other day.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
It's a classic. It's so good.
It annoyed the hell out of me, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, he's a pain in the butt. I'll give you that. They're both kind of a pain in the butt, but I don't know. I think it's the history behind it is insane. Like they filmed it all, they were done, they put it all together, and the movie was 3 hours and 41 minutes. And they were like,
I do not want to watch that cut.
They were like, oh, what do we do? It's supposed to be funny. So they had to, like, cut over half the movie out. And somehow it's cohesive and good. And, like, there's, like, some weird things. Like, one of the characters has a black eye at one point in, like, one shot and then doesn't in the rest. And it's like, why? And it's because, like, an hour got cut in between those two shots. But, like, I don't know. I think it's very funny. It's very silly. If you are someone like me who has to travel a lot to get back home for the holidays, it definitely makes all the worst things that you've experienced feel so much better because of the hell these two guys go through trying to get home. So.
Right. Yeah. I think you might have mentioned that one last time. So, but it's still very fitting because I saw it recently, and now, yeah. So those are our takes on it, I guess. One rec that I didn't mention last time, which I was able to watch again recently, is an animated Christmas movie called Arthur Christmas. Are you familiar with that one?
With the title sounds familiar, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, it came out in like 2011. It was by Aardman Animation, and I think it was also with like Sony Pictures. And basically it's like there's a family lineage of Santa Claus, and like they deliver like all over the world. And the youngest one, his name is Arthur Christmas. He notices that like this tricycle or bike or whatever didn't get delivered to a girl, and like she's the only one who didn't receive her gift, and so it's a race against time to like get it under the tree before like everyone in her house wakes up, so she doesn't feel forgotten. And
Yeah,
it's a very heartwarming film. Like the scene toward the end, it's just it always like brings like tears of joy to my eyes watching that film. It taps into this like, you know, that innocence that we felt like believing in something, and just the wonder of it, the fantasy of it.
yeah.
So it's a really good one that people should check out.
That sounds awesome. It sounds like a better like Fred Claus, the Vince Vaughn one, where it's the family of Santas and Vince Vaughn is the black sheep or whatever. It
Yeah,
sounds like
I've
better
seen the
than
trailer
that.
for it. I don't know if I've actually watched it, but I've seen the trailer, and just the vibes. It's like, yeah, it's probably not great, but
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it's like one of those guilty pleasure things that people watch sometimes. I don't know.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Um,
just mindless funny.
yeah, and another Dunecember tradition. You know, I recently moved to Downey. You still live in Chicago, but we decided to meet up like somewhere in the middle. So you want to tell listeners like where we ended up meeting up?
Yeah, we are in Grand Junction.
Yeah,
We're surrounded by the most gorgeous scenery ever, but we are sitting to record a podcast.
yeah. Yeah, and we were able to convince everyone to stay absolutely quiet while
Yeah.
we do
Oh yeah,
this.
we're outside right now.
Yeah.
Fully outside.
Yeah, we're able to like, you know, I'll be using noise reduction to make sure like no like weather or nature noises like get too disruptive or whatever. But
Yeah.
but yeah, we're at Grand Junction, and yeah, very beautiful place. It's very anti Arrakis. Like Arrakis doesn't look quite this good, you know?
No, it is not deserty at all. Some red rocks, but not deserty.
And we've each got a gift for each other in one of those like things that looks like the boxes from Dune. So
Yes.
I'll give you yours first, and then you'll tell the listeners like what it is. So here you go.
Oh,
Go ahead and
awesome. Thank you.
unbox it.
It is a you know, back in the day when McDonald's made those cups, the collectible
Yeah,
cups.
like the
It's
Batman ones.
yeah, it's a set of those. But it's not Batman. It's all Arthur, like the PBS show.
Yeah.
It's Arthur characters. You know how much I love Arthur. Thank you so much. This
Yeah.
DW one is really good.
Yeah. Man, like, yeah, I just knew how much you loved Arthur, and how you're like kind of upset that it ended recently after like 25 years. So yeah, I figured this will just cheer you up.
Brutal.
Did you ever watch like the 3D animated movie Arthur's Missing Pal?
No. What? Okay, looking it up right now with all of the Wi-Fi signal I have in Grand Junction.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, it came out like August 22nd, 2006. I only remember that because that's like a birthday of someone I know. Yeah,
it's on Amazon.
Yeah, it's got like a weird like song in the middle where, so like the plot is that Arthur is kind of an a-hole, and therefore he accidentally makes it so that his dog Pal runs away. And
Oh.
and so now he's lost Pal and is looking for him, and there's this weird song like midway through where it's like, you and me and the stars up above. It just comes out of nowhere, and there's like imagery and the constellations and stuff. It's so bizarre.
This is nuts.
Yeah, I mean that movie weirdly gets me it puts me in a weird mindset because I watched it a few months after graduating from college, and I was like taking care of things at the apartment. I was the last one there, and it was kind of empty, and so it was kind of surreal, like sitting down in the empty apartment watching that movie in the with an uncertain future ahead. So it's yeah, I got like a weird sort of memory with that movie, I guess. I didn't watch it as a kid. I watched it like right after college.
Wild. Well, that also explains why you gave me these glasses. Obviously, Arthur has a special meaning for you too.
Yeah, and the glasses also have the text on it saying, "I told you not to touch it."
Do you want to open yours?
Oh yeah, sure.
It's kind of big.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, that's like the lid of these toffee nuts that I have here. I accidentally moved it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, these toffee nuts are really addictive. All right, so opening it. Whoa! It's okay, so it's like this snow globe that's the size of an actual globe, and in it is like a replica of like the set of the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, with complete with like a model of Craig himself and Jeff the robot skeleton, and like even a tiny TARDIS on his desk.
Yes. I know how much you love the Craig Ferguson.
Yeah.
And I know how bummed you were that it ended semi-recently.
Yeah, 8 years ago is very recent.
Yeah, very recent.
Yeah, I mean, once that happened, I might have mentioned this before, but once that happened, I was like, okay, I'm done with talk shows. Nothing's gonna top this. And like, I was thinking recently how like with recent Marvel and Star Wars shows, I've like gotten out of the habit of staying up till midnight to watch a new episode because I just get like super tired now.
Yeah.
But I recently made a post where I was like, now, if Craig Ferguson were to come back with another Late Late Show, that would be what would keep me staying up.
I think I saw that post.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, that's good. I love Craig Ferguson. Shout out if you're listening, Craig. We love you.
Oh man, can you imagine if Craig ever asked to be on the show? That would be like the best thing ever.
I put it out into the ether for you.
Thanks. Yeah, the ether from Thor: The Dark World. The second best Thor movie in my opinion.
Whoa! Over OG?
Yeah, okay, I guess we're getting into like the spicy hot take tradition of Dunecember already.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so my ranking is Ragnarok.
Yeah, obviously. If you didn't do that, I would
Dark World, and then original Thor, which is still good, but well actually I'm thinking like just the trilogy. I forgot that like the fourth one came out like within the past year or whatever, and for our universe, that one might be in second place, but for that other universe, the other me, it was like really disappointed with the fourth one and ranks it last. So yeah, I guess maybe that's like a hot take for him over there.
Sure.
But yeah, like, do you have any spicy hot takes?
Spicy hot take.
He who controls the spice controls the takes.
Oh man, I have not thought about this. I don't remember what I said last time. I wish I could respond to it.
No, yeah, you said John Lennon was the worst Beatle in your opinion.
That's still my opinion. That's a good hot take. Man, nothing's hotter than that. Okay. If similar hot take, I think Jagger's the worst Stone.
Wow.
I put all three of them over.
Okay.
Also, oh man, I don't know if I think I like all the other Zeppelins over Robert Plant. I'm just like, I'm not a frontman guy.
Yeah, you just don't like the frontman, no.
Don't like the frontman. Give me the bassists any day.
Yeah, for sure. Damn. Yeah. People, thankfully you're not the people around us they're just like giving us like cold look because of what you said, and they look ready to like roll some stones at you, but they seem to be staying in place. So yeah, because I'm pretty sure it'd be illegal to like throw stones at a person, so you know.
Well, yeah, it's specifically illegal in Grand Junction.
Yeah.
So
All right, and another Dunecember tradition, the weirding way, which is where we each describe like something that we like or do that some people might think is weird but we think is cool. Did you want to go first, or?
sure. Um, I I love cleaning. Like not like I don't know. Like there's just something so satisfying about like, oh, I'm gonna sweep and mop this floor real quick. Like there's something so satisfying to me about that. Um, and like kind of making it a little bit of a game, a little bit fun. Like I don't know, maybe it's like very Snow White of me, at best, but like I really like. So that's sort of a weird thing to enjoy. Um,
Okay.
you know, I wouldn't necessarily want to do it all day, every day, but like I don't know. Sometimes when it's like, man, I gotta clean the house, I'm like, all right.
Yeah, I feel like I've recently gotten in the habit of being better at that and trying to enjoy it more. Because you know, moving to the new place and you know,
Yeah,
helping out the housemates and whatnot. So like earlier, I was washing the dishes and I was listening to you'll never believe this, but so you know, I listened to our previous Dunecember
yeah.
episode in preparation for Dune Part 2. You know, the first one is so long, I didn't want to like rewatch it, so I figured instead of like rereading the synopsis or listening to the audiobook at double the speed again, I'll just listen to that first Dunecember podcast at double the speed and listen to our recap of it to get the gist. And so, but in that process, in looking up Dunecember in the podcast, like the Apple Podcast app, I found out that like some other podcasts called Bad Movie Nights made like 3 of their own Dunecember episodes they
Oh
recorded like
my
last year. So like in midway between like our first one and this one, that so kind of filled the void, I guess. And I'm pretty sure they're unaware of like delayed replays Dunecember. So I listened to those while washing the dishes, of course at double the speed, just like I did with the Dune audiobook. Um, but the topics they were talking about were like these Dune mockbusters I'd never heard, or maybe I had heard of but never watched.
Ugh.
So there's, just looking at the titles, Planet Dune, Dune World, and Dune Drifter.
Are
And
these movies?
yeah, they're mockbusters. You know, they're low budget, similar-ish movies that try to capitalize on the success of like the actual movie. And based on their like descriptions of each of these movies, they sound god awful.
Yeah, I'm looking them up now on my phone. Dune. It came up right away. Oh my god. Planet Dune from 2021.
Yeah.
Dune
So
World. They're all like recent.
yeah. Oh, I just googled Planet Dune. It has like 2.3 out of 10 on IMDb. That's brutal.
That's brutal. They're all like from 2021.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so I guess that's a roundabout way of me describing like my cleaning routine now. But as for a weird thing that I enjoy, yeah, that was like such a long tangent. I really should have used that to like think of like what I enjoy that's weird. Uh, yeah, well, while I think of that, do you want to describe like the Dune themed food that we have like around us here?
oh yes. So we're calling it Sands of Arrakis. And it is just a huge tray of various flavored sugars. So we've got like a natural sugar, a more refined sugar, but it's natural colored. There's definitely some Splenda in here. I can taste it. It's just, we're just eating sugar by the handful, to really get that grainy, sandy taste in our mouths.
Nice.
It's
Yeah,
perfect.
gotta love that sand. Um,
The spice, the
yeah.
sand.
Yeah, so some people might already know this, but what's weird, but I also kind of enjoy, is there are lots of books and audios that I read and listen to from like Star Wars, Star Trek, and Doctor Who. But since there's so many of them that I sometimes have to figure out what I want to read when. And for me, like my way of doing that, and this is for like Marvel and DC stuff as well. I look up the birthdays of like the writers or the characters or the actors, and I kind of use that to help me figure out what I want to read or listen to when. um
Mm.
and sometimes like I even go on IMDb like to see like which actor's birthday it is today, so that'll help me decide like what movie or show to watch I haven't like seen yet, if that makes sense.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's
That's
pretty weird.
yeah, it's weird, but it's not. It's not the weirdest thing I've heard.
I'd be too scared to ask, but yeah, so I guess with that, we can get into Dune Part 2 proper.
Dune Part 2.
Dune. Yeah, just Gurr from Invader Zim.
Seinfeld, Dune. Yeah, a lot of transitions in this movie.
Yeah. Which was surprising because like all the transitions, like all the cuts made the pacing feel more frenetic than I would have preferred, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, feels very like a lot.
Yeah, like it felt kind of different from the first movie in that sense, and I'm not sure how if I like that, because on one hand I would kind of like them to feel like one thing, but on the other hand it's like I guess they'd kind of want them to make them feel a bit distinct. But yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing, I guess.
Yeah, it. I think they're trying to make it move, and I think at some points it does. It feels very fast and like it's cooking, but I think sometimes it suffers a little bit from that quick, punchy editing.
Yeah, like it feels too Rise of Skywalker in terms of just like going from this to that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Which is weird because it is covering like the rest of the book, like it's cramming in all the things from like the final act of that. You kind of described it as like there are like three sections of Dune, and like this one starts with like the final act of that middle section, and then the rest like that third section, and then
yeah,
like it feels like it covers the details but cramming them all in such a way where it doesn't feel as natural.
yeah. I think it this one's a lot more plot driven than the first one, which is cool because we get a lot of the characters that like were sort of introduced in the first one, but we didn't get a ton of time with them. We get a lot of time with them in this, and it so I think that makes it hard because there's like 4 5 storylines going all at once,
Right.
to tie together. But it definitely, I think they do a nice job. Like they do as good as they can without actually eliminating a bunch of stuff. Like I'm every time I watched the second part, I was like, I can't believe they got all this in there. Like they got all this in there
Yeah,
somehow.
like even given the runtime. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's impressive. Even though I think it struggles a little bit to find its footing at points, it's impressive that it goes for it and it takes the big swing, and it maybe it's not a home run, but it's definitely like a double, you know?
Right, yeah, I being an obvious fan of sports totally know what a double is, you know.
Yeah, of course. No need to explain it.
Right, yeah.
We're gonna go play baseball after this. So.
Yeah, for sure, here in Grand Junction.
Yeah. Come on down to the Grand Junction Baseball Stadium.
Yeah.
Steven and I are gonna play some ball.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's the best baseball slash basketball slash golf movie, and why is it Space Jam?
There it is. When you were doing it, I was like, "Oh, this is what movie is this?" I was like, "This exists." Too good.
Yeah, but I also thought it was interesting how they framed this film, where at the start it begins before like getting into like the actual story of Dune Part 2, it kind of begins with this sort of flash forward to an even further future, and like some people like find this like cartridge in the sand and they wipe it and it looks like a Dune video game, and they start playing it as like the classic like 80s 90s graphics or whatever, and then it like transitions, and I guess it's like trying to say that like, oh, some of these tales get passed down in some other media or whatever. But what did you think of that choice?
I think it was certainly weird, but I felt like they tied in aspects of it throughout. Like there was sort of a hint, sort of a nod and a hint to uh almost like the Matrix, where like how real is this? Or like is this a story? Is this a long lost past? Is this a significantly far future? I like that they twisted reality a little bit on the Dune story. 'Cause you know, in the book, it's very like this is in the year 20,000, you
Right.
know, and it's currently 1965 when I wrote this. So it was cool to be like, wait, are we implying that this all happened like in a Star Wars way? It was a long time ago in a galaxy far away. Are we
Right.
implying that the circular, like this is the future, and then after we go back to this new future, we cycle back to a more modern looking future? We have like a dark age. I don't know. I felt like it played with reality in a weird way a couple of points in this movie. Some less on the nose than the digging the video game a la Jumanji or something out of the sand. But yeah, I felt like it ties it in a weird, cool way. Like you can't go into Dune being like, this is gonna be totally normal and not weird at all. Uh, so I think the
Right.
fact that they embraced the weird was definitely cool.
Yeah, it's like, is this technically a video game movie now? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. And it did kind of remind me of, it's something that we kind of forget, but the first of the Christopher Reeves Superman movies begins with like some kid opening a comic book, and then we get into the movie, and somehow that doesn't ruin that movie for me. And the Princess Bride, the grandpa's reading
Yeah,
the
he's reading.
story, and it's like, okay, this is fiction, but we're so invested in the story that he's reading, and it's weird.
Totally. It we're definitely invested, even if it's a weird move. We're totally invested in it.
Yeah. And so part one ended, as we recapped previously, with Fade Rotha with played by a de-aged Sting.
So pure.
That was such an interesting reveal
Yeah.
that we totally didn't see coming. But there's also like the romance between Paul and Channy that felt kind of forced and very bubblegum pop, and it
Mhm.
carries over into this and is a bit more like annoying for me to watch. I don't know. What did you think of how it was handled here?
It's I think it's a flaw in the source material. There's like zero attempt at making it a good romance. And so I think they're overcompensating. And that's why it gets
Right.
that bubblegummy like real Pearl Harbor like movie where it's just like, why is it so everything is life and death and it's so Romeo and Juliet level of romance? Uh I think they're hitting it hard. I think the performances are great, and they're selling me on their attempt. I think it's just a bad writing and it doesn't make sense. Like it's just there's nothing there to make sense. Oh, I saw you in my dreams. Oh, like what? Like okay, so now we're in love. It's like all right. I think if they had made it more, and again, like how can you critique a movie for following the source material? It's what he's doing. But they make it very like, oh, as opposed to just like, well, you're here and I'm here, and we're roughly the only two like 18-year-old people here. Like everyone else is either a child or freaking old. So like or my mom. Like so I think they do a good job. Like I don't know, but I agree. It feels very forced. Though I think they near the end when Paul and Shani are pitted against Princess Aurelian, and it's like, oh, he needs to marry her for political power, but obviously he's in love with Chani. I feel like then it hits a more realer tone, and I'm invested in their romance, knowing the Dune lore and how like the struggle it will be now that he has to marry the princess to be the god emperor. Like, I'm invested in their romance more in those moments. But in the like, we're trying to show you that we're romantic. I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah, and Zendaya does do a decent job. Like I think she's like one of the best things of the newer Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man: Homecoming was my least favorite of that trilogy because there's not enough Zendaya in that one, so it feels like the weird outlier type of thing. You know,
Yeah.
Liz is the main love interest, and the Vulture stuff kind of doesn't add much to the later ones. But yeah, I feel like some of her humor kind of you can see bits of it here, but because of the source material, it's like they're kind of constrained to not have too much of that sort of charisma, which is kind of frustrating in places, I think. But yeah.
They don't because he's like when she meets him, he's like the messiah or like becoming that character. Uh, it's hard for them to have a realistic romance because she views him as that, and he's falling into that role. He's discovering that aspect of him. So I think it can be tough. That's why I think when it becomes real, when it's like, well, I have to do this for power, but I care about you. I'm like, oh, like there it is. There's what I've been looking for this whole time. But it's very brief and it's at the end of the movie, so it's like, ugh. But yeah, I think Zendaya's performance is above par.
Of course, there's also their child who comes into play. And, you know, after like the 2 year gap, and both in our universe and within the film, um, Timothy Chalamet still, he doesn't look like he's aged, but whenever he's like next to the kid, he feels more like an adult, which is really weird.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's got his little sister, his mom's kid, and then he and Shawnee have kids. It's I don't know. I would never describe Timothy Chalamet as looking like an adult. He always looks like Tiny Tim to me.
Right.
But like, I think he does a good job. Like, this is the most like not frail British child I've ever seen him play, and I think he does a good job. I believe that he's not like that he's growing into this role of Moadib. You know?
What'd you think of how they handle their kids' like fate? They okay. So first off, they referred to him as Leto II instead of Leto the Second or Leto II, which was a really weird choice for this film. But
Very weird.
yeah,
Big oversight. Although apparently that's what Frank Herbert wanted, but who's to say?
yeah, who knows? But yeah, what'd you think of how they handled his fate in this adaptation?
It's dark.
Yeah,
It's pretty dark. They kind of, I mean, they bring in elements of Dune Messiah into it, and he's banished. It's pretty dark. To banish him into the sandworm fields, but that's what happens when you're a naughty kid.
yeah. So some deviations from the first Dune book, and you know, some people are having like mixed feelings about that moment. I certainly do.
Yeah.
Um, it was a moment where I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about this type of thing, but yeah, it certainly showed that this is a dark world. This isn't just like, you know, Star Wars borrowed from Dune, but Dune was able to get darker than Star Wars ever could, like just from this one scene, you know?
Right. Yeah, it I think it reminds us also that Paul is a part of that. Like, yeah, he's trying to be the savior, and yes, he's trying to unite the Fremen and the and his family and the sort of the empire. But he's also he's a piece of that puzzle, and in order to do that, he has to be sort of ruthless sometimes.
Yeah. It definitely feels very like something you'd read out of like a Greek tragedy, or even like stuff that ended up in like the Old Testament and stuff like that. Shakespeare even. So
Yeah.
it definitely makes this movie feel like some sort of like modern mythology, you know?
Yeah, that's a great modern mythology is a great way to describe it.
Yeah. I mean, I know if several years ago, superhero movies were described as like our modern mythology, but for better or worse. Also, like the battle sequence, like, this is very much the climax, and you got a lot of like troops like fighting, and like the Fremen and like the electric storm, like there's like
Oh yeah.
there's like so much going on, and sometimes it feels clunky to me, but other times it feels very violently beautiful, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, it makes total sense.
Yeah, well, what'd you think of the music that was playing like throughout this like really long battle, as well as like throughout the rest of the movie, I guess?
Hans Zimmer really does it again. I mean, like in the first one, it's the perfect combo of weird and and beautiful and alien and yet familiar. I think the battle, he really outdoes himself. I think like Zimmer to me really makes it a uh feel like a climax. Uh it's one of the few sequences of the movie that is pretty straight through. Like it doesn't have a lot of the choppy editing that we were talking about. Like it's very linear. They don't really cut away from it ever. It's like once we're in it, we're in it. We're in it for like 23 minutes. And there's music going the whole time. Um uh, it's it's kind of a feat because I think if I the soundtrack is releasing like tomorrow or something, but I would imagine that that whole sequence is one piece. It feels like a symphony. There's also a lot more brass than I'm used to for
Yeah.
Zimmer. Feels a little like John Williamsy, but in a good way. And so that was kind of a nice treat of like, oh, like this is a different sound for the Hans Zimmer sound. It still fits in the world. It still vibes with everything that he's doing, but it definitely has a bit more like triumphant trumpet and tuba than I thought it would.
Yeah, it's kind of, a worm that eats its own tail. Dune inspired Star Wars, and I guess potentially Star Wars music inspired this bit of Dune music
Yeah.
here. And like the way they're riding these giant ass sandworms, like we said in the previous one, that they were bigger than like we expected them to be, even from just watching the trailer. And
Right.
it's just so daunting. And like, because they released this in October, they were very much marketing this with like some of those horror vibes. So in the trailers they're like leaning into that, and they even did reshoots to sort of inject a bit more horror into part two. And for those reshoots, they got none other than David Lynch himself.
David Lynch. I love that he gets like he probably does collectively 8 minutes of this movie, of this almost 3 hour movie.
Yeah, they're the best minutes of this movie, in my
I'm
opinion.
oh, they're so good. If like again, right? You're going to Dune. It better be weird. Lynch outdoes himself in the weirdness.
Yeah, it's like his redemption story after whatever his 1980s version was.
Oh yeah, like yeah, like well, and his 1980s version has like glorious moments. It just is has so many things wrong with it. We don't need to get into it. The pacing. Let me talk about the pacing. But
Okay.
it's so I don't know. Like it is the perfect. He does such a good. He has such a deep understanding of this story from probably years of reconsidering it over and over and over again. That it's so great, and I feel like it seamlessly blends in with the rest of the movie, yet also has classic Lynch aspects that you're like, oh, obviously he did this part, but it doesn't feel like it's almost like when a famous director does any movie where they have their little tropes that they like to do, but it doesn't detract in any way. It's just like, yeah, that's a David Lynch move. Obviously, he did that, but it doesn't pull us out of the world. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, one of those things that Lynch added was this moment where Paul, played by Timothy Chalamet, is sort of thinking to himself, and he has like this internal conversation with of himself, like another version of himself that he imagines, I guess, and
Yeah.
it's played by none other than Kyle MacLachlan from the 1984 film,
Yes.
who played Paul. And
Tying it in, dude.
yeah,
Tying it
he's
in.
an old man, and he says like the Twin Peaks line, "Is it future or is it past?" Because it's like he could potentially be a future version of him, but also like that movie was in the past. So it's got like double meanings going on. Like,
Because
yeah,
he's very like he's dressed modern or hinting at Dune, but he's not in like a Dune costume. It's very like, oh, it's almost like he's wearing a t-shirt. Like it's very strange. It's also weird. Consider this, listeners. Kyle MacLachlan and Timothy Chalamet look startlingly alike. Uh, if you put them side by side and think about it, you're like, oh, they could be related. And that's heightened to the max in this moment. Um, it's very good.
yeah, and there's also a moment in that sequence where the guy who played Paul in the sci-fi miniseries in the early 2000s steps
Mhm.
in as well, and it's kind of awkward. It's just for a moment. He just walks in, stares at both of them, and then walks away. Just no words.
Yeah, it's a nice tie-in.
Yeah, I think his name was Alec Newman, if I remember correctly.
That is
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Um, but yeah, some of those Lynch isms where the lighting, the strobe lights during the battle at a certain point, and certain shots of the sandworms that were like so unsettling, where the camera would like zoom into its mouth and then go through its entire internal anatomy for like a while. It was
But
just
like intercut with like epic music and like weird like almost like a screensaver
yeah, it
image. Like
almost
there's
looked
some
like a
just
vortex type thing.
yeah, he does it. I don't know. It's very Lynchy, but it's very good.
Yeah, the sound editing, the sound design is just amazing, and
Yeah,
you could tell which parts were his. No offense to Denny, that's how his name is pronounced, right? Um,
yeah. Denis Villeneuve, I think
yeah.
he's
Um,
French. If
okay.
he's
Yeah.
not, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
He
I
is in
mean,
this universe. Let's go with that.
yeah. I mean, I rewatched the Pink Panther movie with Steve Martin, which was probably much more offensive than. Yeah. Anyway, um, so like he has his own style, and it's very he knows how to do his stuff, but you could tell like which parts are whose style.
Yeah,
And I don't
yeah.
know if that's kind of a detriment, that maybe if that might make it feel a little disjointed, but at the same time there are already some weird psychedelic things going on. We talked about how like part one had like a switch between like 2D and 3D animation at certain points.
Hmm.
In this one, they even switched to anime at certain points.
It's
But
that tying in, like that would starts with the video game and it ties in aspects of that. I think it's jarring, but it's smart.
yeah, and you could tell they got multiple different studios to do each of the anime segments, so it really showcases various art styles. So,
Yeah.
so it felt very Star Wars Visions in that sense.
Yeah, no, it really does though. Like it's taking filmmaking in a different direction, a new way to play in the sandbox, I think.
Yeah, and it definitely helps during that like final knife fight between Paul and Sting, because they can only have Sting do so much in live action, so for the knife fight they like had him do the voice work, and um it looked really cool though. It almost looked like it was rotoscoped even though it wasn't.
Hmm.
And just the intensity of it. Like, what'd you think of this final ritualistic knife fight between them?
It's very cool. There are I think like about half of it is a shot for shot remake of Lynch's version of the Sting fight because Sting does a lot of the same stuff and it's very cool. I love that we get more of him. We get more of an explanation of the character than in, we really get a lot of his backstory. We get a lot of his like what he's doing, what he's thinking, that sort of thing. But and Sting can act. I'm shocked that Sting is this good of an actor. But he, I think the knife fight is really cool. It's a very cool music again. Like Zimmer's really like hitting the drums, going for like a very rhythmic and not melodic feels, very deep drumming. But I think Lynch did some of this sequence as well, because there's definitely some really cool horror-esque, like weird, wicked editing in this that makes it, again, it's breaking that reality. It's not just like, all right, these two dudes are gonna fight. There's so much more at stake. And so to bring in all this other sort of metaphorical aspects of it, but use those almost literally to make the fight more interesting is really cool.
Yeah, it was just amazing to watch. I think adding in the stylistic schema of what you expect from an anime fight made it even more intense than it would have been if it was just live action again.
Yeah, it breaks. It's not. Whereas the battle is a little bit more realistic, or like realistic for a sci-fi world. It's all the stuff you expect. It's similar to the battles we've seen. This one sort of breaks that mold, and it's really like, this guy who's maybe a god battling this other dude who, if circumstances were slightly different, they could have switched places, right? Like that's what it's leading to. So it's like the battle of gods. It's almost like two superheroes fighting in the most epic way, the most like brutal, dark, bloody, knife fighty way.
Yeah, also the water of life that Paul drinks a bit earlier, that's like poisonous to him and whatnot. It was like, when I looked at it, I couldn't help but think, this looks like blue Powerade to me.
It totally does. Yeah. But it's a good blue though. It's a beautiful blue.
Yeah, I mean, it served its purpose. It was just kind of distracting, I guess.
Yeah.
But regarding the ending, I've heard a couple people share different viewpoints about the ending of the original Dune novel. Someone found it inspiring, someone else found it kind of cynical and dark or whatever. But what'd you think of what they went with here at the end of this movie and how all that feels?
I mean, plot-wise, I think they stick pretty to it, but for me, I feel like they do a nice kind of combo of that. Like this movie really sets up the darkness of this world and how Paul isn't just, I think it's one note to say Paul is the light that's coming into this dark world. He's going to save the day. He's not just that. There's so much, he has to make sacrifice and he has to do dark things to bring light. And so I think this does a nice job of like equal parts, kind of like, okay, like, yeah, he won, but also with that came such a cost. I think it gives the weight of everything while also giving us, hope isn't the right word. I wouldn't say I felt hopeful, but it does. It's not like a downer. It's not like the saddest ending of all time, but it definitely is like, look, it took all this. This is the sacrifice that happened. I mean, so many people die in both of these movies. Yeah. But like, it also like makes it very like, yeah, here it is. But ultimately it's for the best is maybe the vibe I got from it.
Yeah, best of both worlds, like Miley Cyrus, whom we also quoted in the previous one. Yeah, just bring it full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah, but speaking of which, throughout this movie, there is narration every now and then at the end, like before it goes to credits, you see like a book closing, and it's like a book that says Dune on it, and then you see who the narrator is. What'd you think of the person they got to like do that narration?
Oh, Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
I think a weird choice, but again, like maybe David Lynch did this scene. I feel like he did, because it's maybe the single best 15 seconds Freddie Prinze Jr. has ever produced in his life.
Yeah, I mean, in that moment, I was like, wait, I thought this was a video game. We're reading a book. What's going on? But yeah, it's funny though. I was talking about like Freddie Prinze Jr. with a couple of friends recently, like how he met Sarah Michelle Gellar while doing the Scooby Doo movies, and then they got
Yeah,
married and stuff.
yeah,
But like he's well known for that, but he's also done voice work in Star Wars Rebels, and he seems to like really know his stuff and know the Force. And so to hear him as a narrator in this, and then see him at the end, like closing the book at sort of like a wink to the audience type thing, it was just
yeah,
so bizarre, but so kind of fitting in a way.
yeah. Truly, very, very bizarre, but good.
The cinematography, I mean, I guess we already talked about that, how some of it feels very out of this world, like very innovative, just
Mhm.
yeah. So is there anything else you want to touch on, or do you want to go into final thoughts?
Only that I hope they make a third one. Uh,
Yeah.
Dune 3.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've been hearing in our universe anyways, that they might do like TV shows so that they're not so constricted by the feature film format, but they would be like on HBO Max, so they'd have big budget, but there would also be like maybe theatrical releases of the episodes, which is really trippy to think about, like if we're moving in that direction with cinema, you know?
Yeah, to release TV episodes. TV is like changing. It's so much.
Yeah.
It used to be so shitty, and now it's like the greatest thing. It's better than movies most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back and forth, but yeah, it can be like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I think it'd be cool. I also think like the world is so cool, and the way some of the weird things they've done lend itself to interesting television things. It would be cool for an anime episode set in the world of Dune with none of these characters, with two random Fremen like doing their thing. Like it would be cool to see other big name directors come in and do
Oh
an
yeah.
hour long piece again set in the world of Dune, like with maybe following one of these characters, maybe not. Like I think there's so much untapped material. There's so much books. I mean, the books themselves. There's 3 books with Paul, and then it jumps another 10,000 years to 3 more books. Like, there's so much stuff that could happen that I think this really opened the door for a lot of interesting things. So I'm excited to see in our universe and the other what Dune could bring.
Yeah, because the me of that other universe, he wasn't that into Dune. Like he still thought that like it was kind of just okay and that type of thing. But yeah, over here I was like digging the first one, and the second one maybe not as much, but still up there. But yeah, I guess we'll go into final thoughts. So what are your final thoughts, score out of 10, and unit of measurement for Dune Part 2?
Yeah. I give it overall, like I think I'm very impressed with the visuals of the film, the weird and wacky direction, and just kind of trippy aspects of it. Really impressed with the performances and the music. If the music alone, 100 out of 10. But overall, I have to give like some points knocked down for, again, I don't buy the romance. It felt like way out of left field for me. And I think the choppy editing, especially at the top where they're trying to reconcile all these different storylines, uh makes it like a little like tennis match, back forth, hard to watch. So I'd knock it down. I would give it 8.8 out of 10 David Lynch cameos, because he actually plays uh the emperor's servant right at the, like, in the last 2.5 minutes of the movie. He's just there. He doesn't say anything, he just stands there, but you're like, oh, but that's him. So yeah,
Yeah.
8.8 out of 10 David Lynch cameos.
Yeah, his hair was just so recognizable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, all right. Well, for me, and I think we're both in agreement that part one was better than part two. There were some choices I wasn't sure of, like again what happened with Leto II as he's called in this.
Yeah,
And some of the
that alone knocks off at least 2 percentage points for me.
yeah, and like some of the pacing feeling frenetic and stuff, but stylistically it still holds my attention, and that's quite a feat for a movie like this. And so for that alone, I give part two 8 out of 10 sandworm teeth.
Oh yeah, like that epic shot where we see the sandworm's teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I guess that'll do it. Thanks for being on again, Vinny. Do you have anything you'd like to plug for the listeners?
Yeah, listeners, if any of you are out in Chicago, I perform with Comedy Sports. We do shows every Friday and Saturday. Check us out at czchicago.com. And otherwise, have a happy Dunecember, everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And as I've been doing recently, I'll cut in my plugs after the fact in the edit, so that I don't forget anything.
Sure.
All right, you can email delayed replay at delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on Freddie Prinze Jr. He was in that new Netflix movie Christmas with You. It was all right. It had heartwarming moments. We do have an email from Oliver Titcombe, a friend of the show, sometimes emails the show, so I'll go ahead and read that. So he says, "Dear Delayed Replay Steven, just listened to the most recent episode of Delayed Replay. In it, you and the guest on the episode Dylan from Decorative Vegetable talked about Creed 3. During the episode, you briefly mentioned that both of you have Letterboxd D. I have Letterboxd D as well. And he puts his handle Oliver Titcombe, so that's capital OLIVER, capital TITCOMB. And then he continues, unfortunately for Delayed Replay fans who have Letterboxd D, neither of you mentioned what your Letterboxd D accounts are. What were they? Perhaps you could add it to your plugs. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work. Oliver Titcombe from that other universe where the films you reviewed got delayed." All right, thanks for that email, Oliver. So my Letterboxd D handle or username, I guess, whatever the right term is Rotten Tormato. So that's capital R and OT in lowercase OTTEN, and then capital T, and then lowercase ORMATO. People who are Yes fans probably know why that's my username. And I texted Dylan and asked if I could share his handle. He doesn't mind, so I'll go ahead and look it up real quick just to make sure I get it right. His handle is Stellar Starling. So both of the S's are capitalized and the rest are lowercase. So altogether spell StellarStarling. So yeah, just how you would normally spell the words stellar and starling, and it's just those two words together. So yeah, I guess people can follow us on our Letterboxd D accounts. Not sure if I'll add it to my regular plugs, but I guess we'll see. I have noticed I haven't mentioned my Goodreads in a while. You can also find me on Yesshift, a podcast that I do with my dad where we talk about Yes and Yes members, and we even talk to Yes members and to people sort of involved in the prog rock world. We actually interviewed Aaron Emerson, the son of Keith Emerson, as well as Aaron's wife, Joe Emerson, and we're gonna have Chris Walsh on the show on the 7th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So just time zones accordingly. Talking about the Keith Emerson biography that came out recently that we reviewed over on Yesshift. I'll post links to Yesshift's channels as usual in the show notes. And you can also follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram and Twitter, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook, go to stevenshinder.com for info on my novel Lemons with My Grain. And the next book, Trespassing Through the Vestiges, I'm thinking will come out in the new year. I feel like the holidays are kind of on everyone's mind and it might get lost in the shuffle, so and it'll be easier for me to concentrate on marketing it in the new year, so there's that update. But yeah, I guess we'll see. But yeah, on to ending this episode. And yeah, I guess that'll do it. Without further delay, have a good day.